Good day, everybody. Well, we're going to do a fluff piece this week, I suppose. I guess you can call it a fluff piece. So, let's have some fun this week. I'm going to talk about Zootopia. I'm going to have the flaws of the film, and I'm going to have a positive of the film. If you're watching this one, it's a positive one. If you want to see my nitpicky critiques, you can go to this video. Have some fun of me ruining the magic for you. Like I already do all the time. Ruin the magic. So let's not ruin the magic this time. Let's talk about the magic. Let's talk about the magic of Zootopia. Let's talk about the things that make the film good. Not just good, but great. What makes the film great? What makes the film awesome? Like not just because it's a film about anthropomorphic animals, which is, a plus, but just an overall great film. So in order to go over this, you'll notice that in this video I'm going to start painting with broader strokes than my nitpicky film, because on my nitpicky video I'm going to be talking about specific elements that kind of like made me go, huh. Whereas like the overall story writing for this thing is awesome. And as you can expect from a Disney Pixar film, the writing and the dynamics is actually very, very solid. So let's start off with just the overall story arc. So the 3-act structure of this is actually extremely solid. And the fact that it's extremely solid and it started off as a completely different film before is completely amazing. And that's a little background too. It's like they completely came at this from Nick's angle, and they had a completely different Zootopia, and it had a completely different dynamic in it. It's well known what that story arc was, and I'll call it the Nick story arc, is in that they had like this predators had shock collars. It was more from the predator's angle, and Nick was the protagonist. And they literally had scenes animated out for this, and then they ended up shifting that dynamic completely, like pretty late in development pretty late in animation station's development. And made this completely new angle, which is called the Judy one. And I'm very glad that they did, because I think Judy's angle is actually very more presentative in the fact that a lot of people, believe the ideologies of their democracies, of the places where they have diverse democracies, and they want everyone to be able to accomplish and achieve everything, and everyone has those slogans. A lot of countries have those slogans where they want to try to let every citizen succeed. But, the question of, does that actually occur in the real world, or is there actually more complexity to it? I think coming at it from an optimistic perspective, and then kind of having that optimism tapered by the fact that reality doesn't always work that way, made for a much more interesting film than coming at it from a more darker perspective of Nick coming right into the fold as being pessimistic. But the cool thing about that is that them developing Nick as a character that way and having his own like backstory made him more vibrant as a character, even though he was a side character, ended up being the side character, not the main protagonist. Is that it made him having basically had a whole story fleshed out for him, made it so he didn't feel as flat as he probably would have if they hadn't done that. A lot of writers and people will fall into those traps. I do it all the time, where we have a secondary character who's also who's not the main protagonist, but is supposed to be like an associate or very close to the protagonist, who feels particularly flat because we didn't bother making a backstory, too much of a backstory, not going into too much detail about their backstory, and they end up falling flat because of it. They end up falling flat around the protagonist. Whereas this case obviously is not the case. Nick is very much his own character. He's very dynamic, and he very much adds to the film. So that's the last time I'll talk about that little side story thing. So let's just talk about the actual film that got produced now. About 5 minutes in or so. So the 3-act structure is extremely solid. The first act is world building, and they start off in a museum, and that museum, they don't start off in the museum. Interestingly, okay, let me go back to the other arc. The other arc started in a museum, which is interesting because that's where this arc, the Nick arc, actually started in a museum to do the exposition dump about Zootopia and the world it is and how it got to be. They had like some tour guide going around a museum and going, well, this is how predators and prey used to be, and blah, 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 blah. To make it more dynamic, they ended up changing that to a children's play, which ended up working a lot better because they introduced Judy Hopps this way and who she is as a character and her hopes and dreams. And at the same time, work in the history. And using a child's play to do that is very ingenious because we use children's plays to get children involved in our history as well in the real world, so that we're teaching them. All the adults there know about like the Gettysburg Address and like the Declaration of Independence, but we have our kids act out those scenes because we need to teach them those things, and having them interact that way dynamically is a better way of teaching them. So using this as an exposition dump to us as the viewer is actually ingenious because we kind of do that in the real world to teach our kids that thing. We're teaching the kids about the world that we live in, not the adults. The adults are just there to watch their kids, act out stuff and have fun. But in the other arc, obviously they were doing the museum thing, which is interesting because the museum it becomes the thing at the very end of the film where you have the very same bookending thing happen, which bookending is a phenomenon where you start with something and you end with something that draws attention to the stuff that happened at the beginning of the film. So, Judy Hopps going, blood, blood, is very much a bookending thing, but also the fact that they use the museum as the end piece, when in the other Nick story arc, it was the beginning piece, is actually kind of freaking cool because they ended up using the museum scene in the final production. It's just that they took it from the beginning and put it at the end, and they used it kind of as a bookend in that weird way. So it ended up working out for them, which is kind of cool. But getting back to that, we introduced Judy, we introduced the thing. They do that all in that first scene. And then she grows up, she goes into the police academy, you're introduced to the ZPD, we're going to Zootopia, she's introduced to Zootopia. So the end of the first act really is at the time when she's given parking duty. That's the end of the first act because that's when the conflict is introduced. And it's the first conflict of two. So the second act is basically her solving the missing mammal cases, but her starting off as a meter maid in order to do so. So she, her first conflict is trying to get respect of her peers, and it just so happens that becomes ingrained within the whole finding the missing mammals, and where we're introduced to Nick Wilde, Nick Wilde introduces conflict, but his conflicts that he introduces don't come into play until later, into the third act, which covers the most things. Because Act 2, interestingly, is still world building, but it's also more focused on the conflict of Judy Hopps making it, solving this case. But it's also world building for the third act at the same time, because we are introduced to Zootopia in a broad stroke and like, oh wow, this place is cool and everything like that, and then we learn about the nitty gritty, social political structure and dietism and stuff like that, and how it's impacting the residents, and so which won't be used fully until the third act. So, long story short, she solves the case, and that's when we start getting into the third act. The third act begins when Judy Hopps gets on that stage, and the transition, to me, the strongest point of this film is the transition from the second act to the third act. It is a thing of beauty. It is a thing I'm going to ramble about you at for 10 minutes-ish. I'm warning you right now. I'm going to ramble at you for 10 minutes about the transition from the second act to the third act. And this is something they did in just about 2 minutes of film time, about 2 or 3 minutes of film time. They get all this information to the person who's watching the film. They get all this information about the dynamics, about the character dynamics, about the things, and there's so many subtle things about foreshadowing about what's going to happen and stuff like that you don't really see until you watch it the second time around. But there is something I noticed the first time around, which I really much applauded, and I wrote about it. If you want to read about it in written form, I have a Flera article I'll post a link to that was basically my first impressions of the film, my first time watching it. I learned a little bit more second time and third time through, both positive and negative. But I still think that the best feature of this film is the transition from the second to the third act. So here's the transition from the second to the third act. Now, obviously, this is a spoiler review, so I assume that you've watched this film already, and I'm probably going to put a thing. I didn't say that out loud, I guess. But I guess I didn't really spoil anything yet, so good on me. Yeah, I don't think I did. So, spoiler alert, we're going to go into the deep details of the story now, so if you haven't seen it, then, click away, because I'm about to spoil some of the main arcs in the final acts. So, and I didn't do it yet. I actually just spoiled I didn't spoil anything, actually. So, cool. I just so happened not to spoil anything before I gave a spoiler alert. That's weird. Alright, but anyways, if I do, I'll put a box in the front and, say spoiler alert, or just kind of clip something together or something. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure I didn't. Anyways, rambling off. Second and third act, okay? So, she saw the missing mammal cases, and Judy Hopps is pushed in front of the media to talk about her role in this case. And she flubs it pretty bad. For furries, we have an interesting thing with the media, too. And a lot of furries are watching this film and going, oh my god, no, she's messing it up in front of the media. And every one of us knows how that is, because it happens all too frequently, where the media just gets something and they go crazy with it, and we get all worried about them going crazy with it. But, Judy Hopps gets up in front of there, and she starts off okay, and she says, are all these predators different species? Yeah, they are. All the ones that were missing different species? Yes, they are. But she ends up going into the whole issue where she ends up finding these 12 missing mammals. They're all predator species, and they were all going quote-unquote savage because someone behind the scenes is doing things, but we'll get to that later. Actually, we'll get to it now. For the main plot of the film, the sheep, we later learn that May Bellwether is going around and drugging predators in order to make them go savage, and the mayor, who is Lionheart, was stealing them, kidnapping them, and then trying to figure out what was going on, and that's where the missing mammals were. I'll go into a little bit of that in my flaws video about my problems with that as a believable scenario, but this is the good stuff. So all of that crap aside, she finds these 12, and the media's like, so what can you here's the interesting thing, they start pressing her a little bit, and she starts to flub, and she starts to go, well, yeah, they're all predators. All these animals going savage are predators, and they're like, so why is this happening? And they start to panic on why it's happening. But the interesting thing is that the one who pushes her, watch the film again if you haven't watched the film at all, watch it again. Watch who the one, and probably a lot of people have noticed this by now because they probably watched it multiple times. I noticed it the second time I watched it, is the one reporter who presses Judy on. So you're saying it's the predators are the ones that are going savage? That was the exact question he asked to her. Yeah, and the one that she would say yes to, and ended up triggering the whole events. It was a ram. The very same kind of ram that we end up learning works for May Bellwether. So May Bellwether planted a reporter out there who is going to press Judy on this issue that you want to say it's the predators, right? You want to say it's the predators that are going savage, right? You want to present this narrative to the people so that we can, get things going, right? So that's kind of a cool little subtle thing that they did at the very middle of the film when we don't even know that she's behind anything yet. And interestingly enough, when I first watched this film, I already kind of knew who the villain was because Cross Affliction had already predicted it, and I was watching it throughout the film because I couldn't really prove him wrong. He says, "Oh well, because of what happened in Frozen with the bad guy being so, subtle and just like completely off the course, then I'm guessing it's going to be May Bellwether that's going to be the villain of this." And I was like, when I looked at the preview of her in the boiler room, I was like, well, with her mug and stuff like that, I was like, I can't really prove you wrong, and you're probably right about it. So I actually kind of knew who the villain was going into it, or who the villain probably was going into the film. But I didn't know she was working with rams, so I didn't know that the ram asking Judy that question was actually a very big kind of like, see, they're planning this thing out, and you don't even notice it until you watch it the second time around. So that aside, so she ends up basically making a big mistake. She ends up saying things like the predators are reverting to their savage ways, their biological savage ways, and she says that on the floor, and the preys start going crazy. They start seeing predators as threats, and she basically, through her words, through her mouth, she pulled a trigger, which caused a very big divide within the city, and rioting and just overall nastiness. And so the next scene we see her, her boss comes up to her, Bogo, and he goes, it's like, could you come with me? It's like, she's like, oh, what's going on? She's like, well, you've arrived. So basically he's taking her to see the mayor. And while she's passing by in the office, we see Clawhauser, who's packing up his stuff. And she's going, Clawhauser, what's going on? She's like, well, I'm no longer, Clawhauser is a cheetah, and he's like, well, I'm no longer a receptionist because they don't want to have predators be the first thing people see when they enter this office. So they're moving me back to records. It's near the boiler room. Now that statement is extremely important, and the reason it's extremely important is you need to remember, where did we first see May Bellwether when we first met her? We're in records by the boiler room. Now, when they first met May Bellwether, she was in the boiler room maintaining records. Like they were literally in the boiler room when she was helping Nick and Judy out with their case. They went back into the boiler room and accessed the computer records. The reason they did this, okay, and I didn't realize this one until I watched it the second time, is that they wanted to paint the fact that when we see May Bellwether and Judy interact in the next scene, May Bellwether was in the boiler room before this point. She was the one in the boiler room before this point. But she's now sitting behind the desk, the main decision-making desk, while Clawhauser is being pushed back into the boiler room. It's to push the fact, and this is the coolest thing about the protagonist and the antagonist, is that the protagonist and the antagonist, May Bellwether and Judy Hopps, have a lot in common. The one thread that they don't have in common, though, which is established by this Clawhauser thing, is that when Judy is faced by the prospect of growing in her ranks and getting what she wished for and what she dreamed and stepping on the backs of others, she will not do it. But May Bellwether will do it. And that is just, and that whole boiler room comment is to kind of push that point home in that way, is to say that May Bellwether doesn't care who gets harmed in the process of her getting into the position she wants to get into. But as we learn in this scene, Judy Hopps takes a different approach. And this is the most beautiful and awesome scene in the entire film. And I saw it when I first saw it in the theater, and I'm glad I did because it was in big, the things were in such detail that I could see this little minor detail that they put in here, that if you look for it really closely, you're going to see it too, and you're just going to go, wow, that is freaking cool, okay? Here we go. So they're sitting, Bogo and Judy Hopps are sitting there behind the desk talking with May Bellwether. And she's like, May Bellwether's like, and Judy's like, well, so what's this? And she's like, well, we're going to make you the main face of the ZPD. You're going to be the poster bunny of the ZPD because they need a face and they want to see you and you're a hero amongst them because you solved that case. And Judy Hopps is like, I can't take this. Like, she's like, I'm the one it's like, I'm the one who broke everything. And Bobo's like, dude, don't give yourself too much credit. Like, he's like doing the whole cop thing, like, the world is broken. It's not you who broke it, and you did a great job on this case, and we need cops like you in order to keep the things cool. But Judy knows deep down that she's the one that caused this social fervor through her words on that podium. It wasn't her intent. It wasn't her intention for her action with her knowledge at the time to create this devastating social dynamic within her community. But the fact of the matter is that whether done purposefully or not, she knows she did it. She knows that her words triggered these events, that her actions triggered the events that caused the disruption and disorder within her community. And that's not the job of a police officer. And she knew that, and she knows that, and she said, no, like, I am not a hero. Like, and because I did this, and me causing this problem, even though I'm getting recognition from my peers, even though my peers are supporting me, I can't support myself because a cop is to serve and to protect the integrity of the community. And through her actions, through ignorance or malicious, like, even though they weren't with malicious intent, even though she didn't mean to do harm, she knew she did harm. And she knew because she did harm that was not her wish as a cop to do. So she said, I can't do it because I'm not a good cop, because a good cop would make sure that their community is safe, and my actions made my community a lot less safe. Even though I'm being promoted, even though people are seeing what I did is great, what I did wasn't great. So and she says, I'm resigning. And she puts her badge, here's the thing, she puts her badge on the desk and she starts walking towards the door. But the camera angle does not leave the badge. It stays fixated on the badge while she's walking out the door. And there's two words that are legible. There's police, but there's also the round part of the badge. There's like these words that go around the ridge. There's only one word facing the audience at the time that this angle is occurring. And that word is integrity. The word integrity is facing the audience as she's walking out the door. And in that single frame, they basically made a political statement that was so loud and so overbearing that I was like I got chills in that theater. I was like, holy. And because at the time that this film came out, this stuff was all over the news. The whole, Black Lives Matter, like, this was kind of when it's really getting fervorish. Like, I mean, sadly, I hope we don't become numb to this crap, but, it was very much in the news at this point. It was very much a thing that was, pushing in the news, and like, of cops doing actions that have harmed their community. Here's the thing, they may have been intentful, those actions taken by those cops that caused this stir within the community may not have been intentful. And same as Judy, her actions may have not been intentful. She didn't intend for the consequences that occurred. But faced with the consequences of her actions, and knowing that she caused them, she took a step back and said, as a child, this is what I saw myself as being cop being, to make the world a better place, but I didn't do that. I made it worse. My actions made the world a worse place, whether I intended to or not. So faced with the prospect of being promoted and having this badge, like having this honor bestowed upon her, she said, I can't do it. I have to walk away, because the integrity that I started off with, the thing that I wished for was integrity in myself and in my position. I want to keep a cop as an integritous position. I want to maintain that. I want the police to be something that has integrity, which is very much what they were showing in that badge when they were facing us. It's saying, if it was telling us as an audience and as adults, and this message is extremely important, not only to the children in the audience, but to the adults, but actually probably most importantly to the adults, is that while we pursue our positions and while we pursue our dreams to become better and do better and, you know, become better, whether it be in politics, whether it be in police officers, whether it be just a manager at a store or a CEO or whatever have you, a business person, whatever. If you pursue those things, you need to have the integrity to not do it upon the backs of others. Do it upon the merits of that you do, and don't harm others when you're doing it. Keep the position that you want to have integrity. Keep the integrity and the optimism that you had as a kid. And if you can't face yourself as a kid to say, well, this is why I stepped upon the backs of others to get to the position I'm in, or I'm using the position I'm in to cover for my mistakes, then you've lost integrity. You've lost integrity as a person. So if you make a mistake, trying to brush it under the rug is not going to help. And it's not something that people should be promoted to do. People should have the integrity of Judy Hopps. They should have the integrity to take a step back from the positions that they had if they find that that position is making them corrupt, or if they feel that them being in that position is doing more harm than good. And at that time, Judy felt that her being a cop was doing more harm to the community than good. And that was not the reason she became a cop in the first place. So I just rambled at you for about, 7-ish minutes plus, about this scene, this transition between the second and the third act. But the scene only lasts like a far, far less than that. And that's how concise and how beautiful it was as a piece of art. Like, it goes like from seeing Judy as this great protagonist to going, oh gosh, Judy, what have you done? And then Judy, taking a step up and going, yeah, what I did there was not right. And, I have to take a step back because of it. It's beautiful. And now you're going to go watching that video. So now the takeaway is you're going to go watch that video and you're going to watch that scene with the thing, and you're going to say, you're going to look really close, and you're going to on your small television screen, you're going to go, oh yeah, there it is, integrity. That's great. I don't know how I saw that. Quite frankly, it's so subtle and it's so quick that, like, I was surprised I saw it. And then when I saw it, I knew exactly what the artists were trying to do. I knew exactly what the writers were trying to do. I knew exactly what message they were trying to convey, and no one in any review that I've seen and anything who caught onto it. It completely flew under the radar. Because people are saying, oh, this thing's kind of heavy-handed. It's like, there's a lot of subtlety to it. And that's another thing I got to say is positive about this movie. Then this will be the last thing, is that while they're dealing with racial dynamics, and a lot of people go, oh gosh, this stuff, and like, oh, this whole racial thing is heavy-handed, or what I call dietism for this movie. And they go, well, this is kind of heavy-handed, isn't it? It's like a little on the nose. There are certain scenes that are a little on the nose, like, I didn't care for when one bunny calls another bunny cute, that's okay, but when other animals do it, it's kind of, that's like cute. Cute? That's kind of a weird one to use as a colloquialism for, like, the N-word or other such terms. It's kind of a weird term to equivalate to that. I think it kind of lost its sting a little bit, but I guess that's a critique more than it is. This is positive video, positive. There were certain subtleties that I didn't catch because I'm an ignorant white guy, right? No, just kidding. there were certain subtleties, I guess, that I didn't miss, and I think I alluded to it in the other video as well. It's like, apparently there's this issue where, like, Black Americans have, like, hair, like they sometimes have their hair in dreads, and I guess it comes up very often where sometimes white people are like, can I touch your hair, or like something like that happened or something, because it came up in this one YouTube video I saw where, what, quote unquote, the amazing atheist was answering questions proposed to white Americans by blacks, and like one of them had to do with touching the hair, and it made me go, oh, so when Nick Wilde was touching Mae Bellwether's hair and going, it's like cotton candy, it's like, so that's an actual thing, that's an actual racial thing that I didn't know about. It's like Black Americans are angry about white people touching their hair and trying to figure out if it's real or not, like the whole dreads thing. I didn't know that that was a thing. And that was how subtle that was. It's like, now that I watch that scene and know that that question is a thing, it's like, oh, okay. Judy going, you can't touch a sheep's wool. You can't touch a sheep's wool. Kind of makes sense now. The other subtle one was when Judy Hopps first meets Nick and she goes outside the parlor shop after she buys the thing for him. It's like, and she goes, and it's like they're kind of going, oh yeah, cool, it's cool what you did for me there and stuff like that. And Judy's like, well, you're a real articulate fella, and he goes, well, that's high praise. It's very rare that I find someone not so non-patronizing, and like I don't know, maybe I'm stupid or something, but I didn't know that that was a thing either. Like that I was kind of on the side of Judy's like, oh, she's trying to be nice to him, even though she was, obviously had some prejudices about her when she was trying to reach for her thing earlier, but she's trying to overcome it, and she gave him, gave her praise, but her praise, in hindsight, I do kind of see it. It's like, well, she was saying that he's articulate, which I guess in the modern society it's not like a really great compliment, I guess. It's like saying, oh, you can read and write. Like 90% of people can do that now, right? So it's not really like high praise. It's just like you can do things that 90% of people can do, which you shouldn't. By the way, being articulate is not something I like. Being articulate to me is like really cool. Like I like articulation. I like being called articulate. I wouldn't see it as an insult, but apparently it was, and it was seen as kind of like a backhanded compliment back in the civil rights era and before that. It's like when white people would call black people articulate, they couldn't give them any other thing or something like that. I don't know. It's weird. I didn't know about it until like somebody pointed out to me that it was a thing. It's like, people would say, oh yeah, black people are articulate, and that was supposed to be a compliment, even though they wouldn't use that compliment towards other white people. Something like that. It's something that was weird. It's something I didn't know about, but this movie taught me about it because someone pointed it out. Like someone was pointing out that was a backhanded compliment, and Nick Wilde was pushing back at her when he said, well, that's high praise. It's rare that I find someone so non-patronizing. Like that was a sarcastic tone, and it was like I completely missed it. It went over my head the first few times I watched it, and then somebody pointed it out, and I'm like, oh, duh. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. So there are some subtleties. There are some subtleties that somebody who isn't ingrained in those things and isn't ingrained in the social dynamics and like the quirks and stuff like that between, the different races and different prejudices in our world might completely miss and not understand until someone points it out that, oh yeah, that is a thing that happens in the real world sometimes. So there is some subtleties. Now, there's some things that are on the nose. As I said, the whole calling another bunny cute thing was a bit too on the nose. They could have done a little better with the subtlety there, or picked a better word other than cute. I don't know. But as far as like the messaging and everything like that, overall Zootopia is a very freaking good film, and I would recommend watching it. If you're a furry, you probably already have. So, yay. But now you know a little something more about the film. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully you learned what integrity means, because that's the most important thing. Integrity. Have integrity. Go out there and be integritous. I'm going to get the hop out of here. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Click the like and subscribe button. I've never said that before, and I don't want to say it again. Don't make me say it again. Please don't make me say it again. I'm selling out. Anyways, have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.